So, you're going through a divorce in Fuquay-Varina, and probably one of the biggest question marks hanging over your head is the house. Specifically, how much is it going to cost just to figure out what it's worth? Well, in this explainer, we're going to clear that up and give you a real budget and a plan for 2026.
Look, we get it. Dividing up assets is incredibly stressful, and the family home is almost always the biggest, most emotional piece of that puzzle. When you don't even know what the appraisal itself will cost, it just piles on more uncertainty. We're here to swap that stress for a solid number you can actually plan around.
All right, let's cut right through the confusion. Over the next few minutes, you're going to learn about this kind of surprising benchmark that appraisers use, what factors can push your price up or down, and you'll walk away with a simple, step-by-step plan. Let's dive in.
So where do appraisers even get their numbers from? You might think they just pull a price out of thin air, but you'd be surprised. Many of them, especially in the Raleigh area, start with the exact same public document, a sort of secret price list that's been hiding in plain sight this whole time.
It's called the VA fee schedule. Now, this is just a public list of the top dollar the Department of Veterans Affairs will pay for an appraisal on a VA loan. And I know what you're thinking. I don't have a VA loan, so why should I care? Well, here's the inside scoop. This list has become the unofficial rulebook for what the local appraisal industry charges for pretty much everything.
And that is the key right there. When an appraiser in Fuquay-Varina sits down to write up your quote for a divorce appraisal, chances are they're looking at this VA schedule as their starting point. It really sets the standard for the entire market, and it's our key to figuring out what you should expect to pay.
Okay, but here's the thing. The cost isn't the same all across North Carolina. The VA schedule actually breaks the state down into different pricing tiers. So to find our number, we first have to find our spot on the map.
You can see the difference pretty clearly here. The statewide standard kicks off at $525. Then you've got some specific counties that are a little bit higher, but I want you to look at that bottom row. High-demand counties. See that big jump in price? That's where things get interesting for us.
And boom, there it is. Fuquay-Varina is in Wake County, and the VA classifies Wake County as a high-demand area, right up there with places like Charlotte's Mecklenburg County. This tells us right away that we're looking at that top pricing tier.
So let's put a number on it. The benchmark fee, the starting point, for a standard single-family home or a condo appraisal in Fuquay-Varina is $800. This isn't a guess, it's the official baseline. This is the foundation for your budget. Now, what if your property is a duplex, or maybe a small multifamily building? Well, in that case, the benchmark jumps up to $1,100. And that just reflects the extra work and the complexity that goes into valuing a property that's also an investment. But, and this is super important, this $800 to $1,100 range is your starting point. It's the baseline. Because a divorce appraisal, well, it's a different beast entirely, and its unique demands almost always adjust that final number.
So you're probably asking, why would a divorce appraisal cost more than a regular one for a mortgage? It's a great question, and the answer is simple. You're not paying for the same thing. You're buying a completely different product for a much higher stakes purpose. Think about it like this. A standard appraisal is for a bank. It's basically a checkbox to make sure a loan is secure. But a divorce appraisal, that's a legal document. It has to be so detailed and well-supported that it can stand up in court and survive being picked apart by two opposing lawyers. The appraiser might even have to show up and testify. It's a whole different level of work.
So remember this, that potential extra cost is for legal defensibility. You're not just buying a number, you're buying a valuation that can withstand a legal challenge. And trust me, getting it right the first time saves a ton of money on reappraisals and long, drawn-out arguments later.
Okay, so we have our $800 baseline, and we get why there might be a divorce premium. Now let's get into the specific things about your situation that can move that final quote up or down.
There are really four big variables to think about. First, property complexity. A unique custom home with a bunch of acreage is just more work than a standard house in a subdivision. Makes sense, right? Second is the scope of the job. Do you need a value from today and a value from the date you separated? That's like two reports in one. Third, rush jobs. Anything you need faster than the standard 10 business days will cost extra. And finally, the appraiser's own experience and how busy they are will play a role in their fee.
So here's the best rule of thumb to keep in your head. Start with that $800 VA number. Then, depending on how complex your property is and what your lawyers need, just expect your real quote to land somewhere near or a little bit above that number.
We've covered a lot of ground. We've got the benchmarks, we've got the variables. Now let's put it all together into a super simple budget plan you can use right now.
So here's the bottom line for your budget. For a typical single-family home or condo in Fuquay-Varina, you're going to want to plan for a cost that starts at that $800 benchmark and potentially goes up from there for more complex situations. If you've got a multifamily property, your starting point is going to be more like $1,100 and it goes up from there.
Here's your 4-step game plan to get a fair quote. First, know your property type. Simple enough. Second, use that $800 VA fee as your anchor, your starting point. Third, think about your unique needs. Is the house super custom? Will your attorney need the appraiser to testify? And fourth, and this is probably the most important part, never, ever move forward without getting a detailed quote in writing that spells out exactly what they're going to do for you.
So, there you have it. You're not in the dark anymore. You're no longer just guessing. You now know the how and the why behind the cost, which means you're prepared to have an informed, confident conversation with an appraiser and to make sure you get a fair price for the critical expertise you need to move forward.